farmer's daughter. Take one.
Wow, just wow. I mean, what can I say? This movie is just awesome. Welcome in, Screenaholics. My name's Jake, and this is the very first episode of this new channel. Now, if you know my previous channel, no, I'm not doing away with doing hot sauce videos, as you can see. They're still there. We're still going to do that. I just wanted to dive into something different in the time being while I'm taking a little time off doing hot sauce videos. Here's the new channel, Screenaholics. This channel is going to be dedicated to doing movie reviews and just talking about film with me and a bunch of other people that, you know, it's one of my passions. I love film. I've been wanting to make a channel about film for a while and reviewing films and just talking about films in general. And now's the time to do it. You know, I figured why not? So let's dig in. Today, we are doing a review of probably, in my opinion, one of the coolest horror movies I've seen in a very long time. One of the most original horror movies I've seen in a very long time, for sure, and that is X. If you've not heard of it, please go and watch the trailer. I'll put the trailer down below in the description. You can go over and watch it right now before you even watch this and get anything spoiled for you. It's in theaters right now, so I say, man, go and see this movie. So you can definitely still grab a ticket and go see it this weekend if you're really up to seeing just this very classic yet not classic horror movie at the same time. Let's get into this review. Now, X is directed by Ti West, and this is an A24 film, and if you know me, you know I love A24 films. I love A24 films so much, they're like literally my favorite movies. And I know some people are going to be like, oh, A24 snob, because A24 is like its own like little independent company that makes these really weird movies with really high budget people in it. The Lighthouse, for example, the shirt I'm wearing is A24, The Witch, Hereditary, Midsummer. I can go on and on about all of the movies, the amazing movies that A24 puts out, and not just horror movies, but really good movies in general. Moonlight, Lady Bird, just so many great movies. Eighth Grade, mid-90s, just so good. They're probably like my favorite production company, to be honest. And this is Ti West's first A24 film, and I love Ti West. He's one of my favorite horror directors, and when I found out that he was doing an A24 film, I accidentally lost my mind. I was like so excited. I was like, man, Ti West is finally going to get a shot. It's the same thing with Darren Aronofsky. He's doing a new A24 film with Brendan Fraser, and I can't wait for that. I love seeing my people that I love outside of A24 bust into A24 and be able to do something just original and take on that kind of weird side of them. Even though Aronofsky is already pretty weird with himself doing his own movies. But I'd like to see what he can do with A24 because I feel like A24 would embrace that even more. X is directed by Ti West. Now, you may not know Ti West, but if you know horror movies, you should know Ti West. Ti West has done movies like House of the Devil, which is a great independent low-budget horror movie. He's done movies like The Sacrament, which is just a recreation of like the Jim Jones cult that happened, and he turned it into a movie, and it turned out to be very good, like in my opinion. And it's still a low budget horror movie, but it still had an impact with me. And Ti West has also done a lot of things. He's also produced a lot of Eli Roth's movies, the same thing for Eli Roth with him. Eli Roth produced The Sacrament. Ti West also made an appearance in You're Next. He was actually, I believe, one of the producers of that movie. If not, the reason why he was in that movie and made a cameo was because he's worked with those actors before. Those actors were in House of the Devil. They were in The Sacrament with him as the director. So I think they just kind of threw him in the movie as a cameo. I'm not 100% sure if he worked on it, but if he did, awesome. That movie is amazing. But he's actually the first dude in that movie who gets shot and killed. He's the one that gets shot with a crossbow when they're at the dinner table, when he looks out the window. That is Ti West, actually. So you guys have seen Ti West before. You may not have heard of his movies, but definitely go check him out because he's great. He's done stuff for VHS on the VHS ones. He's did one on ABC's of Death. Ti West is just a really good director, and he definitely deserved to direct this movie. As for the cast is really cool in this movie. You have Jenna Ortega as Lorraine. Mia Goth plays Maxine, and actually she also plays Pearl, which I did not know until afterwards when I looked it up. Brittany Snow, who is actually very well known, and she has been in a lot of movies throughout the past, 10 years or so. She is also in it. She plays Lynn. Martin Henderson is also in it. He plays Wayne. He's a pretty well-known actor. Stephen Uri is in it as well. He plays Howard. And last but not least, Kid Cudi is in this movie, which is awesome. He plays Jackson, and his character is just awesome. I love his character. It's one of my favorite characters in the movie. Now, let's jump into this thing. Now, before we get going, I just want to say that this movie is very rated R. It is a very adult film, so if you are not over the age of 18, please don't watch this movie. This movie is very graphic, very rated R, way over the top. It is strictly rated R. So if you're under 18, don't watch this movie. And if you're under 18, don't watch this video because not only am I going to talk about the graphicness of what happens as far as violence, but all the other things that happen in a movie based around what this movie is based around. And going from there, spoiler alerts if you have not seen the movie. If you haven't, stop right here, go see the movie, come back. I'm going to go through a breakdown of the whole entire movie, and I just don't want to spoil anything for anybody. And then while you're at it, please go down, like, and subscribe, and leave a comment if you've seen this movie, or leave a comment about some of your favorite A24 films or Taiwan'S films. I would love to hear what you guys think about A24 or what you think about Taiwan'S. I would love to just see what everybody feels about Taiwan'S. If you're a big Taiwan'S fan like me, I would love to see your comments. If you're not, I would love to know why. So let's jump right into the beginning of this movie. It jumps right to the scene where the sheriff is pulling up at this house that it's very Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Instantly right off the bat, I got Texas Chainsaw vibes, and you'll see throughout this whole entire review that a lot of it reminds me of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There's just dead bodies everywhere, just blood everywhere. He walks up, he's looking at one, and you can just tell right off the bat, this is the ending of the movie. A thing to remember, though, is that at the beginning of this movie, there is a TV on in the house that is playing a sermon of a preacher, and that's something that will pop up throughout this film that is very important to the end of the movie. From there, it jumps backwards to before all of this happened, and the first thing you see is Mia Goth in a dressing room with a big mirror, and she is doing cocaine. In walks Wayne, and Wayne is giving off this, like, kind of Matthew McConaughey vibe, you know, like, all right, like, hat, southern drawl, Texas kind of vibes. And she gets out of the chair and they head out of the building. That's when we find out what time period we're in and where this is located. It says cocktails and topless entertainment. And that's when we find out they were at a strip club the entire time, meaning that Wayne more than likely is the owner of the strip club. Mia Goth was a stripper or / his girlfriend. And then also the other character, Lynn, is also a stripper who heads out with them. Now they hop into a van that says plowing services, which is kind of funny when you think about it. I didn't notice on first glance, but now I think about it, I thought they were just trying to be discreet with what they were doing, but at the same time, it's a really funny thing to think about that it's plowing services that they hop into the van because, I mean, they're on their way to make a porn movie. Now, and that's when it pops up, 1979. That's when we know exactly where we are in time when this movie is shot. We are in the late 70s, and we find out as well that we are in Houston at the time. So we are in Texas. So again, Texas Chainsaw Massacre vibes right off the bat. We are in Texas in the 70s, right then and there. And sure enough, boom, they show up at a gas station. Texas Chainsaw Massacre again. Now, while in the van, they did talk about the name of the porno they're making is called The Farmer's Daughter, which means you automatically know they're going out somewhere remote to do this. More than likely, the setting at the beginning of the movie where all the dead bodies were. Also, as they drive past, it flashes a rooster on the side of the road and zooms in on it. Now, again, just like the plowing services on the side of the van, I believe that this is sort of a nod or a symbolism of just, I mean, you get it. It's a rooster porn. You know what it means. Now, in the gas station is very key to point out, just like I said before, this preaching Christian channel. This is playing on a TV at that gas station at the same exact time. And while in that gas station, Maxine and Wayne are having a conversation with each other. And Maxine says she wants to be a star.
I need to be famous, Wayne.
Ain't nobody else out there like you. You know why?
Why?
Because you got that X factor.
And Wayne tells her that you have this X factor, and that's the reason why that you'll be a star. And that's the first time we get a reference to the name of this movie. Now, they head outside, and that's when you meet Lorraine and RJ for the first time. They're a couple. RJ is the cameraman, Lorraine is the sound girl. He said he's trying to shoot this movie almost as like an avant-garde way to disguise their low budget. And now I took that as, Taiwan'S, you are going to take this movie, and you're going to shoot it in a way that is very different to kind of hide the fact that, you know, it is kind of low budget. It isn't low budget, but it is. It reminds you a lot of a low budget film. Now, on their way out to where they shoot the movie, they do pass a crash that's on the road between a semi and a cow. And it is very, very graphic. There is cow guts everywhere, blood all over the front of the semi. Cow is torn apart. Mia Goth is throwing up. And I took this as a symbolism of them driving into their own death. Now, they get to the house. And when they get to the house, Wayne gets out of the van. He walks up to this house that looks like from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And he waits out front. He's knocking on the door and he's asking, is anybody there? And then shows up Howard. And Howard's stumbling and he's like, oh, get off my property. And he grabs a gun. And again, this is very Texas Chainsaw Massacre-esque, including almost like the Jessica Biel one, like the remake, reminded me a lot of this scene when they're just kind of like knocking on the door and the old man's like, what are you doing? And blah, 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 and this and that. So finally, like Howard walks up to the door and he has a gun and he's just yelling at Wayne saying, get off my property. I don't know who you are. And then Wayne explains that, you know, you told me we could rent your guest house for a couple days. Turns out that gun is actually not loaded. Wayne actually jokes around that the gun in the glove box of the van actually isn't loaded either. Now, now while this is all happening, everybody's watching from the van. Kid Cudi looks out the window and says,
That's one ugly son of a bitch.
and then they all decide to get out of the van and start heading towards, because Howard's going to show them where they're going. Now, during this time, Maxine, or Mia Goth's character, sees the old woman up in the window of the upper story of the house, and she's staring down at her, and that's the first sense you get of something isn't right here. Like, this old lady is just looking at them in this very mysterious, weird, creepy way. Now, there's so much that goes on between now and when the action really picks up. A lot of just really little things, like Kid Cudi's character, Jackson, talking about being in Vietnam. You finding out that Howard doesn't like them for being there because, essentially, he pretty much knows why they're there. Now, this brings upon the first, scene of their movie. And this scene's very graphic. I don't need to go into detail about it. While they're in the bedroom shooting that and doing that, Mia Goth's character, Maxine, decides to slip out and smoke a cigarette. She wanders around the property and she finds herself at a pond. At that pond, you notice behind her that the old lady is creeping on her. And again, this comes in this creepy old lady that you really don't know anything about. And so Mia Goth gets naked. She jumps into the pond. She starts swimming around. Now we bounce back into where they're shooting the scene. And it's post-scene, and Wayne actually says people's eyes are going to pop out of their heads when they see this. But then Lorraine, gets really weirded out and starts talking about how, I don't know how you guys do this. And they just talk about how it's their job. And then, Lorraine jokes around with Jackson about how good he was. And then Jackson walks over and he takes it all in stride. And he looks at her and he says, I love you, girl. And it's this kind of I don't want to say sweet moment, but this moment when you realize that, there's more than just them shooting a movie. There's a chemistry between these characters. Now, from there, they show the opening scene of the porn, and that's when Jackson breaks down, and he knocks on the door of Lynn, and Lynn opens up, and he proceeds to tell her that he broke down, and she says, we don't have a phone. And she still invites him in, and then they go sit down and just talk and have something to drink at a table. Now, we start to hit here to where starts to get that weird A24 kind of esque writing and cinematography, because it's going to bounce around between a few things. Now, we flash back to Mia Goth in the lake swimming, and it's almost like there's no sound. She has her ears under the water. It's a very wide look where she's just real small in this huge lake. And it kind of makes you feel like she's alone. And I think that's the point of that shot, is to be really wide and that she's by herself. And she starts to swim back. And you see this alligator just starting to follow her. And this alligator's just following her all the way through the lake. And she finally gets to the very end. The alligator's about ready to eat her and she has no idea. And she hops out of the lake real quick and gets on the dock before it can eat her. That's when she walks back to the guest house. She sees the old lady on the porch waving at her. So she waves back and the old lady kind of says shush, shushes her, and then tells her to come here. So Mia Goth goes and goes into the house. She can't find the old woman. She's looking around, and then the old woman kind of scares her. It's like a jump scare out of nowhere. It's like the first jump scare. You're boom, out of nowhere. And then they sit down and they start to, have lemonade and a drink at the table, just sort of it's happening in the scene that's being shot outside in the guest house. Now at that point, Lynn walks over to Jackson and says, come with me before Daddy gets home. And then it flashes back to Mia Goth's character, Maxine, and Pearl at the table. And it reminded me almost like she was telling her to come on before Howard got home and got mad that they were in the house. Now, as Pearl is walking Maxine out of the house because she wants to get her out of there before Howard gets home, she shows her a bunch of pictures of her when she was young. And she said she was a dancer and she used to be beautiful, and that Howard used to do anything for her and loved her and thought she was gorgeous, and just give you this breakdown of how this woman feels. This old woman feels like she is not loved, in that her husband doesn't love her anymore, and that she thought she was so beautiful as a dancer when she was younger. And that's when you finally get this sense of oh, here's what's going on with this movie. you know, Howard's kind of this old, stern man who's like, no, I don't like any of you. I don't want any of this going on. While she still is like thriving to be young and loved and cared about and thought as beautiful. Now, Pearl reaches over and like touches Maxine's skin, and that freaks Maxine out. She doesn't like it, but it's almost like she's like envious of her young skin. And then you see back at the scene that they're shooting in the guest house, Lynn says, what if Daddy catches us? And that happens at the same exact time that Howard pulls up outside of the main house, which means that, like, also, again, they were just referencing they don't want Howard to catch them in the house. So Maxine slips out before Howard can get in there and see anything, and she runs back to the guest house. Now, a whole ton of stuff happens after this. The second sex scene happens in the porno. Mia Goth and Jackson have sex in a barn with a bunch of cows around them. The old lady is staring in, watching them. Mia Goth sees them and goes, you know, and she envisions herself in Maxine's position. Now, before that happened, it showed a scene with Pearl as she was brushing her hair in the mirror and putting on makeup, trying to just look pretty and try to get Howard to appease to her. Kind of like how the girls are dressing around her that she keeps seeing at this guest house. Now, when she sneaks outside, she's staring in. Like I said, they kind of switch places and she envisions herself on top of Jackson like Maxine is. And then at the same time, everybody in the room starts realizing how amazing Maxine is. Now it flashes into Pearl back inside the house and she tries to give Howard a hug and she tries to like kiss him and Howard like pushes her away and says, no, I can't because of my heart. And now you start to see the reason why things are the way they are. You know, Howard is pushing her away. Howard doesn't want anything to have to do with her, really in that kind of way. And it's mainly just because he is afraid that he's going to have a heart attack. Now, everybody sits inside like the main living room of that guest house, and they all talk about love and what it means about getting older. And one day you're going to get older. You're not going to be able to have sex anymore. And, you know, it kind of speaks to the language of the film, like, you know, these old people, this old woman wants to be loved. She wants to feel beautiful, but she's so old that they can't. And Howard's so old that he can't. And like, they're kind of speaking on the fact that like, while they're young, they're going to do what they want. They're going to have sex with whoever they want. And that's what they're going to do. And it has nothing to do with love. It has everything to do with just being young and having fun. Now they say, toast to perverts. And they say, toast to independent cinema. And I feel like that's another nod from Ty West. Toast to all you horror fan lovers that love all this twisted, messed up, horror stuff that makes him money, and including the independent cinema that kind of got him to the point to where he is today. Now, here comes, in my opinion, one of the most impactful parts of this whole entire movie. It flashes to later on that night in the same room. Jackson, aka Kid Cudi, is on the couch with an acoustic guitar playing a version of Fleetwood Mac's Landslide that Lynn is singing. And it's very beautiful. It's very good. I love that scene. It's one of my favorite scenes in the entire movie. And at the same point, they're kind of crossing the screen between two, them in there and Pearl in her room at night. And she's like taking off the makeup. She's undoing her hair. And you can see the sadness in her eyes, and it kind of speaks to the same language as what the lyrics are speaking. And you kind of feel for Pearl a little bit, and she kind of like lays down and she's crying and going to sleep because, you know, she doesn't feel like she's enough. She can't be what those girls are. Now, as she's getting ready to lay down in bed, it's playing the lyric, I'm getting older too, in that song. And it shows her back, and her back is all just dented in, and like her bones are showing. And again, that's another part of this song that's kind of like speaking to what's going on in the movie about her being old and not the person that she used to be. Now, this is where it really starts to turn. Now Lorraine, the sound girl, and the girlfriend of RJ, the cameraman, decides to say, hey, I want to do this film. Now, she was always kind of like a little bit offish about it in the whole entire time and wasn't sure how to feel about what they were doing. But now, after the conversation they had in the living room, she now decides, hey, I want to do a scene in this movie.
I want to be in the movie.
Well, you can't.
The story can't just change midway through.
And obviously, RJ just, you know, gets out of hand and he gets all upset and he's like, no, you're not going to do it. And then Lorraine's like, why? And he goes, cause, you know, this is different. This is different. You know, you're not like these people, or you're not going to do this. And she points out the fact that it's just like acting, you know, and how he loves Psycho. And he goes, well, Psycho's a horror film. It's not a porno. And then that's when I really put two and two together that what they were talking about. He doesn't want her to get involved because he doesn't want her to get involved in this movie in general. Not the porno, but he's saying no because, you know, that's a horror film and we don't want you to get involved. So he's pretty much, you know, foreshadowing the fact that, hey, I don't want you to get involved in this broader real horror film that is actually happening in front of them, not what they're filming, so she doesn't get hurt down the road because he actually loves her. Now, that didn't end up working. Wayne ended up settling down and making him be like, hey, this is okay. She's going to do the film. And then it goes into the main bedroom. She's in her bra. She's in her underwear. And you see her take off a necklace that is a crucifix. And I took this as her just, shedding her innocence and putting herself into this film, kind of taking a step into the unknown for herself and kind of getting away from her shyness and putting herself out there to be in the film. So her taking off that was like a really big deal for her. Now, obviously, you know what happens from there. Another scene for the movie they're shooting. And then it fast forwards to later on that night where RJ is in the shower. Everybody's asleep. It's nighttime and he is just crying. He's crying over what happened. He's crying over the fact that she wanted to do a scene and she did a scene. He gets out of the shower and you see him just make a horrible decision. He grabs the keys, he gets into the van, and he takes off. Horror movies set in time periods and certain time periods and stuff like that. A really good song to use to portray just like a really good horror sequence is Don't Fear the Reaper by Blue Oyster Cult. That is what's playing on the radio as he's getting ready to leave to say, screw you guys, you're not going to be able to do anything without me. And it's just jammed up. It is awesome. I love that song. It portrays so well in horror films. And he pulls up right by the house to get ready to take off down the driveway. And Pearl is standing out there. She is right there, stops him, dead in his tracks. And he hops out. He walks over to her and he goes, are you okay? Anything I can do with you? Because it's an old woman. He wants to help her out. But that turns out to be his downfall. She tries to hug him. She tries to kiss him. And he's like, nah, I'm not having this. What are you doing? Let's find your husband. And then proceeds the very first kill of this movie. And let me tell you, this kill is phenomenal. This kill is one of the coolest kills I've ever seen in a horror movie. It is graphic. It is classic. It is everything. She stabs him in the neck and then proceeds to stab him over and over and over and over and over again until his neck is completely ripped open. And it is practical effects. It is a lot of blood. There's blood all over the front of the lights. It's red. Everything's red. She's covered in blood. He's covered in blood. It is just gnarly. It is such a gnarly, awesome kill. I love practical effects with kills. I hate CGI with kills. The practical effects are so much cooler and it looked just amazing. And she stands over top of his body after she gets up and she's done all red and the lights are red because they're covered in blood from the headlights. And she just starts dancing. And it's playing this like classical song that I'm not sure what the song is, but she's dancing to it like she was younger. And it's almost like it revitalized her. This kill almost drew something out of her that made her feel like she was young again. And she was just dancing and having a great time and dancing. And that scene was just so cool. It was such a unique scene. It was beautiful and I loved it. Now from here, obviously things spiral. Lorraine wakes up, notices that RJ isn't there, gets up, goes to look for RJ, goes and knocks on the house door. Howard says he can't find his wife. And then he asks Lorraine to go down in the basement to get a light. And obviously the stupidest thing, it's classic. And I love they put this in it. It's like, I know you're like, you dumbass, don't go down in the basement. But she did it. She went down to the basement. And that's the perfect thing about this movie is that like, it's obvious, but it's a classic style horror movie. So you know she's going to do it. So she goes down to the basement to find this light so she can help Howard find Pearl. And sure enough, Howard locks her in. I mean, that's a given. You knew that was going to happen. It was going to happen the entire time. Now, before she went up to the house, she asked Wayne to go out and help her because Wayne woke up. And Wayne goes into the barn to look for RJ. Now, Wayne is walking through the barn kind of talking to himself, thinking that RJ's in there. And he steps on like, I don't know if it was supposed to be a nail trap or if it wasn't. It was just, it looked like a board with a nail in it. I'm not sure if it was supposed to be there or if it was placed there by Pearl. But either way, he steps on it and it goes right through his foot. And he's screaming, he's asking for help. And then he sees a light shining, like a light like this, shining back and forth on the back of the barn. And he's like, RJ, is that you? And he thinks it's RJ. So you see him walk up and he like puts his eye up real close. Boom. Obviously, you know what's going to happen. Pearl's out there, scares him, and then stabs him right in the eye. And this scene is awesome. And then Pearl walks in. He's laying on the ground dead. And when Pearl walks up to him, you can see his eye laying on the ground. And we go back to what he said.
Those eyes are gonna pop out of their damn skulls when they see this.
And that was a foreshadow for what was going to happen to him. His eye popped out of his head. It was awesome. So awesome. She stood over top of him. She stabbed him with a pitchfork. And then she kind of like brushed up hay on top of him to hide his body. So Jackson wakes up because he hears something and he tells Lynn to go back to bed and he's going to get up. So Kid Cudi's character Jackson gets up and walks to the kitchen to get something to drink. He's completely naked. Trust me, a lot of this movie is just seeing Kid Cudi's butt the entire time. It's a lot of it. And again, just like Wayne, he sees a light outside, so he decides to go out and look. And when he goes out and look, Howard's out there with a gun, and he proceeds to say, "My wife is ill. I need to find her. Will you help me find her?" And then Jackson says, "Yeah, I'll help you find her." And then it kind of does a zoom out behind Howard where you can see the silhouette in the doorway of Kid Cudi. And, well, he's naked, so you can pretty much see everything hanging down. And yeah, that's, again, essentially just Kid Cudi naked this entire movie. Now, again, there's a lot that happens between this and now. I'm going to try to summarize as much as I can. There's a POV scene where Pearl is sneaking down the hallway to go into Maxine's room. It is very reminiscent of Halloween or the first Friday the 13th. Another nod to classic horror movies in this. Kid Cudi and the old man go out by the lake looking for them. They split up to try to find it. When they split up, Kid Cudi's character Jackson finds another car in the lake that's not theirs. It has a Texas license plate. It looks like a Volkswagen Bug, and he's very mysterious about it. Then he thinks he lost Howard, but then Howard ends up showing back up. And at that point, then you see Jackson get shot in the stomach by Howard, by a shotgun. Pearl crawls in bed with Maxine. She's wiping blood on her. Lynn wakes up and tries to go find everybody because she doesn't know where anybody is. Then she hears a scream of Maxine saying that, you know, she was in my bed, and you see Pearl run out of the room. While that's happening, Lorraine is still in the basement. She finds a hatchet. Lorraine runs up the steps and starts hatcheting the door just like The Shining, busting through it. Howard meets her there and smashes her hand and tells her to shut up and get back down in the basement. Now again, Maxine does a bump of cocaine, and they go off to try to find everybody that they can find. Lynn finds the old lady naked by the lake while they're searching for everybody. And then sure enough, they get into an argument when Lynn tries to help her, and the old lady's like, "No, I don't want your help. Get away from me, you whore." Pretty much that's exactly what she says. So then Pearl ends up shoving Lynn into the lake. And then that's when the alligator just straight up attacks her and eats her, calling back to the alligator that was trying to attack Maxine at the beginning of the movie when she was swimming in the lake. Now, Maxine then washes all the blood off of her after doing her cocaine. She sees Pearl and Howard walking up from the lake. And then that's when she goes and hides because they're coming into the guest house. Then they come into the guest house and they look and they say, "Well, it's a ghost house. Nobody's here." And they start talking about all of the kills they made. And this is when Maxine realizes that, oh, my friends were all killed by these crazy, insane old people. Now they sit down on the bed, and again, not going into full detail about this, but it's them having a conversation about, "Oh, will you call me beautiful? Yes, you're beautiful. You're the love of my life. You're the greatest thing I've ever seen. You're amazing. I've always loved you." And kind of reconnecting Howard and Pearl together through all of this really messed up killing has kind of pulled them back together and made them love each other. Then they proceed to full on do it. Two old people on the bed, straight doing it. And Maxine's underneath the bed, and Maxine's freaking out like what's going on, and she sneaks out and she actually gets away. Now she runs to the main house to try to find the keys, and that's when she hears Lorraine screaming. So she lets Lorraine out, and Lorraine has the hatchet, and Lorraine is screaming at Maxine, telling her, "I shouldn't have trusted you guys. I should have never listened to you guys. I hate all of you guys." And that's a callback to RJ trying to warn her that you don't want to be in this film. Not just the porno film, but you don't want to be in this film in general. If she wouldn't have tried to be in this film, she probably would have survived. But the fact that she was in this film at all and she tried to do something meant that she, ended up being her demise. And that's exactly what happened. She goes to run out the door and boom, shotgun to the chest. And just like Jackson, she's dead just from that shotgun. And it was Howard who's the one who shot her, and Howard and Pearl come walking in, and they're talking about disposing of the bodies and getting rid of the bodies and what all they're going to do, and everything is going to be fine. And Maxine overhears all of it in the other room. And then that's when Howard has a heart attack. And again, another call back to, I can't do this because of my heart. He wasn't able to have sex because of his heart. And sure enough, boom, he had a heart attack right after he killed her. And then that's when Maxine saw her opportunity to strike. He's dead. He doesn't have the shotgun now. And she can kind of make a strike at Pearl and get out of here alive. And then that's what she does. She goes, she runs right up, and she has the gun. And they have this full conversation about, Pearl is telling her, you're just a whore. You're just an attention-seeking person. You're never going to be good enough. You're never going to be good enough. It's never going to be enough. And, Maxine still goes back to, all eyes are going to be on me. I'm going to be everybody ever wants. I'm going to be the star. And she pulls the trigger of the gun she has. Now, the gun she has is the gun from the glove box that was mentioned at the beginning of the movie of not having any bullets in it, unfortunately. So then Pearl picks up the gun, tries to shoot Maxine, but in turn completely misses and blows herself out of the house. This small, weak, frail old woman just gets blown straight through the front door, right on her butt, and it is hilarious. It is like self-rewarding hilarious. Now, right after it happens, the TV is on that Christian channel in the house at the same exact time. The same Christian channel that was from the beginning, that was playing in the house when the sheriff showed up, and the same one from the gas station. And right as that happens, when she blows herself out of the house, the preacher goes, now that's what I call divine intervention. And I thought that was amazing. A great placement of that line in this movie, saying that, like, you know, they intervened on this really messed up old couple that just wanted to torment and kill these people just because they were young and they were having sex. Maxine stumbles out and Pearl is still somewhat alive, and she says, you know, you're just gonna get old like me. They're just gonna take it away from you just like they did me, just referencing her as almost like, I used to be you and now look at me. Now look at me, I'm old and nobody wants you, and that's what's gonna be you. And so then, to reference back to when the first time that Mia Goth came into the house, she tells her to shush and puts her mouth up. After telling her to shush, she gets into the truck to go leave, but instead of pulling forward, she backs up into the old lady and completely explodes her head all over the place with an awesome, awesome final kill of the movie. Maxine drives off into the sunset, very reminiscent to the end of Texas Chainsaw Massacre when she's driving off and laughing. And instead of laughing, again, Maxine decides to do a bump of coke. Now, here's where the big twist comes, and it's a crazy, crazy twist. Crazy spoilers. If you've gotten to this point and you haven't seen the movie, and you don't want the end of the movie pretty much ruined for you, turn this off right now. You find out the entire time on the TV, when it flashes back to the beginning of the movie, which is technically the end, that Mia Goth's character Maxine was the preacher's daughter the entire time. He unveiled it, saying that his daughter was turned to sin by these people, and sure enough, his daughter was in the light. She had all eyes on her on the TV the entire time. That's what the preacher was talking about the entire time. He was talking about Maxine the entire time, and that's how you find it out. But that's not even the very end of the movie, though. The very end of the movie is even cooler, in my opinion. They are going out and they're trying to figure out why all this happened, and one of the cops looks at the sheriff and says, why did all of this happen? And he goes, who knows? And then they find the camera, and he hands the camera over to the sheriff. And he says, wonder what's on it. And the sheriff goes,
I see one goddamn fucked up horror picture.
And that's the end. That was the motto of the entire film. And it just comes right back around to being, hey, this is one goddamn fucked up horror picture. It was just self-aware the entire time. And, you know, that's the ending. And there's a post-credit scene, and I'm not going to go into that. You guys can watch it. You guys can see the post-credit scene and determine what you think happened in that post-credit scene. And, you know, I just want to know how you guys feel about this movie. You know, I really liked it. I thought it was classic, but yet new. I thought it was, like, original, but also self-aware. It was just so many of these things that I love about horror films. It was gory, but it was also beautiful. It was sad, but also, like, I don't know, funny in ways. It was very, very good. There was a lot to love about it. I absolutely loved it. I am going to give it 4 bottles out of 5. Okay, Screenaholics, thank you for watching. Again, please like and subscribe. This is one video of many, and I really hope you enjoyed. Comment down below, and we'll see you on our next review.